everyone. Today we are going to make a reusable shaking behavior patch for Quartz Composer that you'll be able to use throughout your compositions to make little effects like so. So let's get started. We have a blank canvas, just a clear patch to give us that gray color right there. So let's get something on the screen to shake, because that would be helpful. Grab an image and we'll use that beautiful login box that I made. Hopefully you will make a much nicer one. So there we go, we have something to shake. So now let's talk about how we're going to do that. In its most basic, a shake is just starting in the middle, sliding out, back to the middle to the other end, back and forth like so. And if you remember your high school math, that is what a sine wave does. A sine wave starts off at 0, goes out to 1, back through 0 to -1, back and forth and back and forth. So we are going to create a little sine wave function that allows us to get a number that goes back and forth over time. And we'll use that to animate the position of our layer. So we'll bust out a JavaScript patch and we'll do our little coding in there. And it's over here so you can see it. I'll get rid of this comment, which just kind of tells us a little bit about the JavaScript patch. And if you remember, again, your high school math, or if you're like me and you had to Google because you've forgotten your high school math, you know that a sine wave's amplitude, which is how tall the wave is, by default, again, it goes from -1 to 1. We can change that by multiplying it by, it's called amplitude. And then the sine of 2 pi, which is a mathematical constant, dealing with circles. Frequency of the wave, which is how many times a second it will fluctuate back and forth, times our time value. So this part right here gives us a number from -1 to 1. No matter as time goes, the time changes, no matter how far up it goes, it's going to give us that number that fluctuates back and forth between -1 and 1. And if we only wanted to animate 1 pixel ever, we would just use this. But since we probably want to change how far our animation goes, we'll use the amplitude to adjust that. We'll multiply this value. So if we want to go 10 pixels on either side, we would give it an amplitude of 10. So we'd multiply this result by 10, so we'd get a number from -10 to 10. We'd slide back and forth between those values. If we change this to 100, we go from -100 to 100. So that will change the size of the animation. And again, this would be great if all of our animations were taking place around 0. So if our layers were always going to be starting off at position 0, this would be fine. But since we probably want to give people the ability to move the layer around on screen to start, we'll add an offset. So this will allow us to start the layer off, let's say, at 100 pixels. So our animation would start at 100, go to one side, and then back through 100 to the other side. Alright, on to the actual coding bit. The JavaScript patch by default gives us an output that is a single number, which for our purposes is great because we're just outputting a calculated position. It gives us by default 2 number inputs, which doesn't quite give us what we need. Numbers are fine because we're going to be feeding in numbers for everything, but we have an amplitude, a frequency, a time, and an offset. So we need 4 inputs to our equation, so we'll just change that to 4. And you can see down here that we now have 4 inputs. And now we need to just basically create this equation down here. I'm not going to worry too much about this, but basically this stores our result, this returns it, and then here we're just setting our result to whatever equation we throw in over here. So what we'll do is multiply that down. We'll use this, the last number, as our offset. These are 0 indexes. 0 is our first input, 3 is our fourth. And then so we'll use 0 as our amplitude, and I'll just copy that so I don't have to type again. And then, math dot sine, and I'll end the parentheses over here, and I'll just put this the middle part on a new line. So we need 2 pi, so 2 times math.pi times the frequency, which will be our second input, times our time, which will be our third input, which is index 2. So here we have our amplitude, and then 2 pi times frequency times time, and then we can take the sine of that, plus our offset, which is right here. And then that will give us a calculated position based on all that stuff. And if you look over here, you see some not very user-friendly inputs. In 10 minutes, I'm going to forget which one was frequency, which one was time, which one was offset, and stuff like that. So what we'll do is add some input splitters for us. You can just right-click, pick Insert Input Splitter, and it will throw out an input splitter for us that we can just rename to whatever we want it to be. So this one will be amplitude. Our second one was frequency, I think. See, I'm already forgetting, which is why I always do this. I have a brain the size of a walnut. This was time, or TM, if you're a bad typist like me. And this last guy was the offset, which will allow us to set the position by the default position of the layer. And then we'll do another one for the output because, again, output number, what is that number exactly? It's the position, so we'll just name it position. So if we hook this up to our X position right now, we're not setting any values in here, so we'll just see nothing changed because we're not changing anything over time. We don't have an amplitude, we don't have a frequency. So let's, for fun, we'll decide we'll do a 50 pixel shake. We'll shake 2 times in a second, and then we need to bring in a time value, so we'll use a timer patch for that. We'll shake for 1 second, seems fine to start with. So our amplitude is 50, so we'll start off at 0, we'll go out to 50, back through 0 to negative 50. We'll shake 2 times a second, and our timer is going to run for 1 second, so we should see 2 shakes across 50 pixels, or 100 pixels width from 50 to negative 50. So if we go to our viewer and we flip this timer on, beautiful, we have a shaking behavior. Pretty simple stuff, huh? So, in one sense, we're done. We're technically able to do what we want to do. But this isn't exactly as friendly as it could be, because if I want to do, I want to do 3 shakes in 3/4 of a second. I have to now figure out my frequency based on, let's see, I gotta divide it, and I don't want to be thinking about math and stuff like that. I just want to say, all right, give me 3 shakes in 3/4 of a second. So what we'll do is we'll add another couple input splitters to do the math for us. So we'll basically make it so the user just types in the number of shakes, We'll make that a number splitter by switching the number. We'll copy and paste that, and we'll make this duration. Alright, so this will tell us how long we're going to shake for, and this will tell us how many times we shake. So we'll hook up our duration to the duration on our timer, so that way we always run that exact amount of time. And to calculate our frequency is just simply the number of shakes divided by, so we'll switch that to division, number of shakes divided by our duration, and that will give us our frequency. Alright, so if you're a programmer type, or just someone who remembers math at all, or a fake programmer like me, you notice that we're dividing here, and we could possibly maybe divide by 0, because by default we're getting a duration of 0. So what we'll do is we'll set a minimal value here of 0.5, and there goes the fire truck is going by. Say hi to the fire truck, everyone. And that way we're making sure that we don't accidentally divide by 0 and explode anything. And then, so we're hooked up there. So now if I change this to 3 shakes in 1 second, and we flip our timer, we should see 3 shakes in 1 second. Ta-da! And we'll just, for fun, we'll do 1 shake in 3 seconds, just to see if we're actually doing what we think we're doing. Now I gotta get that, pick up the timer so I can toggle it on and off manually. So we should go out, back, and then stop in the middle. Ta-da! Wonderful. So again, we're doing exactly what we want to do. We can set the number of shakes, set the duration, and we're off to the races. So, we could call it a day, and every time we needed this, we would just come in here and copy and paste this stuff, which is not very, very useful. Well, it's not user-friendly, I should say. So let's fix that. We'll take this stuff, and we will add it to the library. Call it shaking behavior. Patch that shakes. Man, I cannot type. I should really fix that one these days. Alright. So there's our shaking behavior. And if you notice, that's not exactly very useful either. Our inputs are gone, and our output has been renamed to just output. One of the goofy things about Quartz Composer is when you add a patch to the library, it sort of condenses it down as much as it can, which is not very useful. So what we need to do is delete this guy out of here, look over here for our shaking behavior, and edit it. So we'll highlight it, right click, pick edit, and I'll bring this up here so you can see it. And what we need to do is basically republish all of our outputs. So we'll publish our input as number of shakes, duration. We'll publish this turn on as, we'll call it trigger, to trigger the behavior. Amplitude we'll publish as distance, how much we want to shake. And then I will publish our offset as offset, because that one actually makes sense. And then we need to unpublish this and republish it so we can actually get the name and position on it. Alright, so now we have number of shakes, duration, amplitude, which we've published as distance, a trigger, and we'll output the position. So we'll save that, close it to your window. And now if we bring a shaking behavior back in here, we'll see all of our inputs correctly published. So now we'll hook that up to the X position again. We can set number one shake 3 seconds, distance of 50, just like we had before. And what we'll do is we'll put in a hit area, so we can actually trigger this with a click. We'll add an interaction patch, interaction 2. These guys up so they work. We'll hook up the click to the trigger of the shaking behavior, so every time we click on this hit area, we'll trigger the shake. And then, let's see, by default, this will be a big rectangle or square in the middle there. We'll change this to a width 240. I just know these because I made the other one previously, and I know the values, so I'm just cheating and bringing them in there. So we can see it's right over our login button now, and we'll turn off setup mode. And if we click, there's our shake behavior. And we can set these to 3 shakes in 3/4 of a second. Again, we don't have to do any math now, so this will be easy to use. Ooh, that's kind of crazy. Let's make the distance 10. There we go. And there's a nice happy little shake behavior that we can reuse over and over. Hope you guys found this useful, and until next time, happy quartz composing.